Hi, Tricia.
Hey, Stephanie, how are you today?
I am okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
I'm excited to be here.
So let's start at the top. Tell us about where you work.
I'm the director of the Maryland Archaeological Conservation Lab, which is at Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum down in St. Leonard, Maryland. And Jeff Pat is a 560-acre park along the Patuxent River, and we have got over 70 recorded archaeological sites here on the park. And the MAC Lab serves as the state's official curation and conservation facility.
I think I've told you this before, but I had my first job in archaeology at the MAC Lab. It's where I cut my teeth, so I have my heart is in the MAC Lab for sure.
Come back anytime to visit.
So what is your favorite thing about your job there?
Well, I like how varied it is. I mean, one day I might be out in the field digging. Another day I might be working with collections from some of the 10 million artifacts that are here in the lab. And then recently I've been working on a community engagement project and been doing a lot of oral histories and visiting a lot of family cemeteries for the rural community that's down here where the park is located. And so I think all aspects of studying the past, whether it be archaeology or history, that's really what I love about my job.
Yes, I've seen some press about your work with Walville. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you all come up with. That seems like great work.
Oh my gosh, it's so exciting and so rewarding. And we've got such great descendants that are working with us. And they're excited about the project too. So every day it's a new adventure.
Well, that's great. And I imagine part of that is what keeps you in archaeology. But what first got you into this profession?
Well, I was going to be a medical doctor, and but I took an archaeology class from James Dietz at the College of William and Mary when I was an undergraduate. And he just made it so darn fun. It made it sound like studying the past was like the best thing that you could ever do. And so I took a field school after I took his class. And from there, from the very first day, I was hooked. And then I was fortunate to get my first job out of college working at Colonial Williamsburg under Ivor Noel Hume. And that was interesting and also reinforced my conviction to stay in archaeology.
Well, James Dietz and Ivor Noel Hume are certainly two of the biggest names in archaeology. So what a treat, I'm sure. And I'm sure that really did help to sort of make the trajectory of your career, some of their insights.
Yes.
So you wrote an essay for Maryland Archaeology Month. Why don't you tell us about that?
So this article was on a privy that was filled between the 1820s and the 1830s, somewhere in that time period in Baltimore City. And I recently co-authored a book on Baltimore archaeology with Adam Fracchia. And as part of writing that book, I looked at the artifact assemblage from this privy from the Francis Whittington household. And those collections are in the MAC Lab. And it's a large and really interesting assemblage that documented a collection that was generated by the cleanup of a house after what appeared to have been a devastating house fire. And we know who was living in the house, the Whittington household. It was a 3-generation household with the matriarch, Frances Whittington, and her daughter and son-in-law, and several children. And they apparently lost everything in this fire and cleaned up the property, what was left, threw a lot of stuff in the privy, and then moved outside of Baltimore into Baltimore County. And so these fire damaged and soot damaged artifacts, studying them as an assemblage really gave us a really good idea into what that really busy household looked like before that fire took place.
And isn't there some kind of connection to Babe Ruth with this assemblage?
So, yes, so this is on 18 BC 79, which is the site number for it's called the Ruth Saloon site. And Babe Ruth's father ran a saloon in the early 20th century in the same location on the same lot where the Whittingtons had lived. And so we've got a couple of privies that are associated with the Babe Ruth time or his father's time on the property, with the property serving as a tavern. So we've got some animal bone and some dice and liquor bottles and things like that from that part of the assemblage. But this Whittington privy, which was a really nicely sealed deposit, was dated to the 1820s and 30s.
Oh, that's interesting. And I guess that sort of gets to the point about context, the topic of Maryland Archaeology Month, which
Right.
knowing where all of these artifacts came from can just shed so much light on life throughout a century of Baltimore.
Right. Archaeologists and historians are not the only ones interested in the past and in the material remains that are left behind by people. We love artifacts, right, as archaeologists. And so it's really not surprising that there are people out there who are not professional archaeologists who also really like pieces of the past as well. And I think that one of the things that maybe is not clear to some of these treasure hunters is that archaeological resources are non-renewable, and that every time somebody uses a metal detector to remove artifacts from a site or digs a privy just for the goodies, the unbroken objects, they're destroying the context in which those archaeological artifacts were deposited, and thus destroying valuable information about the past. If we use the Whittington privy as an example, you can see that looking at those artifacts as a complete assemblage allowed us to create a much more complete picture of that family and what their life was like right before that devastating fire, by looking at that entire assemblage of over 5,000 artifacts, from their animal bone, from the food that they ate, to the toys that the children used, to the massive quantities of ceramics that they had in this house. So if that privy had been excavated by someone who wasn't a professional archaeologist, then all of that information would have been lost.
And I am certain that a lot of these artifacts were probably broken and small, but you can parse out so much information even from objects that are that smaller and not quite as sexy on the surface, right?
Yeah, and a lot of the ceramics mended into almost complete vessels as well, and represent a really good range of the types of ceramics that were available in the 1820s and 30s from the English Staffordshire market. So some really amazing things that are, many of them are featured on our Diagnostic Artifacts in Maryland website.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great resource for anybody interested in archaeology and history. So I think you've touched on it, but are there other reasons you think that this is an important topic we need to be talking about this year?
Well, I think that there is a lot of interest in looking at privies, and I just think that it's something that we need to educate the public about, and just in how we work using soil stratigraphy and horizontal and vertical controls to excavate our sites is something that I think that a lot of people don't understand how important that is in recording data.
For sure, for sure. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for all of your efforts in public archaeology and public education. There's lots of opportunities for people to come down to Jefferson Patterson Park and get their hands dirty and learn archaeological techniques, right?
That's true. We are having a public archaeology session running Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays in May. And that is where you can come in and dig with us on a 17th century site here at Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum. And if you go to our website, there should be a link where you can sign up.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tricia. It's always good to talk to you. Take care.
Thank you. Happy Archaeology Month.